Cord Jefferson was an Emmy winner for Watchmen. Other projects have included Master of None, The Good Place, and Station 11, and his new feature is American Fiction. Cord, this is a great movie. I love it so much. It's really, I felt it
Thank
seems
you.
like two movies in one, right? A very sharp satire about race, and then also this really affecting and like really emotional family drama. And I guess you blend it so well in the story. I guess visually, I wanted to ask, like, how did you approach making it feel like these were not separate? You know what I mean, like that it is one story, and like how you kind of like visually approached that aspect of it.
I think that is sort of the way that I approached it visually the way that we approached the whole movie, right? Which was that I wanted to make a movie that felt like life. And, when you have tragedies in your personal life, the rest of your life doesn't stop. And sort of like when you have sort of successes in your professional life, your personal life doesn't stop. These things are sort of like all one and the same. And so to me, I just wanted to make sure that we struck the right tone in those two worlds, because I wanted to make sure that the movie was satirical, of course, but never farcical. And so we just wanted to keep everything really grounded, and so from the, uh, we got a production designer that I thought was incredible named Jonathan Guggenheim, and sort of Jonathan and I just really went over the spaces and decided that we really wanted them to feel lived in and authentic. I didn't want anything to feel too hyper stylized or sort of like too bland. I wanted it to feel like real people lived and worked in these places. And so he just went through and sort of like found a bunch of really great locations. The movie was entirely shot on location. We found really great, beautiful, old lived-in homes and banquet halls and stuff in the Boston area. And then, the visual references that I gave the cinematographer were things like Wonder Boys and Squid and the Whale and these kinds of other sort of New Englandy, literary, lived in kind of like brownstones and homes. So I just wanted it to feel, a unified sense that this was a real lived in place, that these were real characters, that these were real human beings, and that the places that they lived in had a real sense of history. I wanted sort of like to feel the sense of history in these places, and sort of like the fading glamour, for instance, of the family home, and sort of like the erosion of wealth and their sort of beach house, like these kinds of things. I wanted them to feel authentic to the story, and I wanted them to feel like, as I said, unified and never silly. I wanted it to feel real and grounded the entire way through.
Right. You mentioned early in that answer there about the tone too. Obviously, I think this is like, it does feel like a high wire act because the tone is so specific and like really like locked in. You have this Jeffrey Wright performance at the center that is just incredible, and he's like seemingly like one of those performances where it's like you can't imagine when you watch the film, you're like, I can't actually imagine anybody else doing this because he does it so well. So I guess like how like I'm sure like casting Jeffrey Wright, it's like of course you could cast Jeffrey Wright, but I guess like how did you work with him, and like kind of like how did you guys discuss Monk, and like how like how your collaboration kind of evolved?
It was amazing. I mean, I couldn't think of anything but Jeffrey Wright either. That's why, when I was reading the novel Erasure that I adapted, when I was still reading the novel the first time through, I started picturing Jeffrey Wright as Monk in the book. Like I started reading the book in his voice. And so that's how early that I knew I wanted Jeffrey. And so he was the first actor we went to with the script. He signed on, and then, everything sort of Jeffrey signing on really legitimized the movie in a lot of people's eyes. The financiers were willing to come up with more money when Jeffrey signed on. Other actors were very excited to work on the film because they got to work with Jeffrey. So it really sort of like it became a sort of like a real thing when Jeffrey came aboard to many people. And so the great thing about Jeffrey, and the terrifying thing about Jeffrey, as you said, is he's got this tremendous pedigree, and he's sort of like done all these great roles. And sort of the first time I saw him was in Angels in America, the Mike Nichols adaptation for HBO. And I was just mesmerized by him. And so, I was so happy that I got to work with him, but also so intimidated because, this is a guy who's worked with literally the biggest directors in the world. He works on the biggest movies and TV shows in the world. And so here's me coming in, having never directed anything before, saying like, would you do my movie with me, Mr. Wright? And the thing, though, that I realized was that the reason Jeffrey is a great actor, well, one of the reasons Jeffrey is a great actor is because he's hyper collaborative, because he sort of really wants to get in there and work with the director and work with the costume designer and work with everybody to sort of really find the story and mine for the truth in there. And so it was just easy working with him from day one. From day one, he was super collaborative. He sort of like was asking me about my thoughts and my ideas and sort of really sort of digging down to the material in a real way that sort of showed to me he was serious about the work and serious about the material and taking me seriously as a director, despite the fact that I'd never done it before. And so that, to me, sort of him taking me seriously allowed myself to take myself seriously in a way, because it was like, this is a guy who believes in you. And sort of, even when I didn't believe in myself and I felt really terrified at the prospect of directing a movie, I looked at a guy like Jeffrey and the rest of the tremendous cast who had done this work before and who really believed in me and believed in the project. And it gave me the courage when I sort of didn't feel like I had the courage myself.
You mentioned your first time director. Was there how did your going into it, the preconceived notions maybe you had, and how those kind of exploded, I'm assuming, and how what was I guess had you how did it exceed your expectations, or what was different from what you expected, I guess, from being a first time director at all, or anything like that?
I mean, I think one of the things that jumped out at me when I first started it was that I realized that in some ways I'd been directing as a writer for years, right? So I'd been writing for TV for about 6 years before I found this novel. And, what I didn't realize was that, when I was writing scenes, I was already thinking about what these characters are wearing, right? Or thinking already how these actors are going to move around the space, or what the room should look like, or how I want them to enunciate this word in this line, and how I want them to tell this joke, how I want this joke to land. These are all things that I was already thinking about when I was writing scenes. I just wasn't articulating them to anybody, because a TV writer's job, is you write the script and then you email it in, and the director takes over, and the showrunner takes over. And so I sort of didn't realize that I was already doing the work, and sort of in some ways, obviously I don't want to be reductive. There's more to directing than just sort of those things. But, in some ways I was already thinking in the way that a director thinks, about these things. And so that's one thing that surprised me. And then the second thing I think that surprised me was how much I really loved it. I love working on TV shows. I still do. It's something I want to do forever. I learned a lot from all the shows I work on. I'm incredibly grateful for those opportunities. But I think that a thing that I didn't know that I was missing out on necessarily was just the joy of being on set. I really, really loved being on set, and I really loved, TV writing it's a great gig, but TV writing, most of the time is you drive onto set, you drive onto the studio lot at 10 a.m. and you sort of order an expensive salad from Jones on 3rd for lunch, and then you sort of drive home at 6 p.m. and you're in an air-conditioned room all day with these other writers. And don't get me wrong, it's a collaborative to work with other writers, but it's so different from being on set and sort of, being there at 1 a.m. on a Tuesday, freezing and hungry, and you're out there with 60 other people, and the camaraderie that builds, and sort of, it's just really sort of, if you can boil it down into anything, it's just creative problem solving. That's what sort of directing is in many ways. It's just every day, inevitably, something's going to go wrong. Probably multiple things are going to go wrong, and you need to figure out how to make it right with sort of what you have in front of you. And so to me, that kind of, I just loved the group effort of that. I loved working with all these people and sort of being in the trenches and getting my hands dirty in a real way. That's something that I knew that it was going to be hard, and I prepared myself for that. And I think I was surprised by how, despite the fact that it was much harder than anything I'd ever done in my professional life, that I loved it so much. It's maybe not even in spite of the difficulty, but because of the difficulty. I really liked that.
Yeah, I mean, the love I think you have for the film, it comes through in the film, because I think it is incredibly successful. And obviously, we're talking it's coming out here in December, and one at the audience award at TIFF, it's been obviously very well received. One of the things I was wondering is it's a really great satire about progressive white kind of entertainment industry, and just a very sharp, and you're showing the film. A lot of the audiences are the people that are being satirized, and I guess how have you been surprised by the response to it, or has that exceeded, or have your expectations for how it would play been tweaked at all by how it has played? I guess I don't even know.
No, when I sat down to make this movie from the very beginning, I wanted to make a movie that felt like it was a Big Ten film, that it was inviting to a lot of different kinds of people. I didn't want to make a movie that was for people in New York and Los Angeles. I think that one of the things that I think that we are in the most polarizing time of my, at least my entire life. I'm 41, and this is the most divided I've ever seen our nation, and in many ways the entire world. And I think that the only way we move past that reality is if we can find ways to sort of talk to each other and sort of like and not sort of like retreat to our own corners and just sort of like live in our own bubbles of our own news and our own information and our own entertainment and our own music. Like, I just think that there needs to be some sort of cohesion amongst people again. And, so I didn't want, I think that I understand like issues of race and issues of identity and issues of sexuality. These are important issues, and sometimes they have fatal consequences. I understand sort of people's impulse to be self-serious about these things, but I didn't want to make a movie that felt, I think there's more than one way to skin a cat. And I think that sort of like there's more than one way to build empathy. And I think one of those ways is just inviting people in and sort of like letting them laugh and saying like, look, this is all a little ridiculous, and sort of like come in and enjoy yourself and laugh and have a good time. And, sit there next to a stranger who may think differently from you politically or about race or about sort of identity, and sort of like find something that you can meet in the middle on. That to me was always the goal. And so, I've been delighted to see, as you said, we've shown it to predominantly Black audiences. We've shown it to predominantly white audiences. We've shown it at Black colleges. We've shown it to young people, to old people, to fancy film festivals, to sort of like, just general sort of like audiences, to English. We've shown it in Europe now. Like there's just, and sort of, there's been people who have come out, all different kinds of people across the spectrum, and told me that they found something that they really enjoyed. And then even, there was a woman that came up to me in Savannah, Georgia. We showed it at SCAD, an older white woman, and she said, I realized halfway through the movie that I was laughing at myself, and that sort of like I was the white woman that I was laughing at. And she said, but it felt so good. It just felt so nice to do that. And I think that there really is a desire, I think, for people to take a breath a little bit and stop being, I feel, at least me, I feel like I've been on alert for like 20 years, and I'm ready to stop being so tense and to find some joy. And I think people are excited to go to movie theaters and laugh and sort of like, and be in that communal experience of sort of what it feels like to laugh with a bunch of people and experience these emotions with a bunch of people. So, I've just been overjoyed that there, there's a joke, I don't want to spoil it, but there's a joke in the movie about white people in the Hamptons, and we showed the movie at the Hamptons Film Festival, and there was white people in the Hamptons screaming the joke at me like on the street, who sort of like were so into it and had such a good time. And it felt like, it's not mean-spirited. It's sort of like, it's not lectury, it's not scoldy. And so that was the movie that I wanted to make, and I'm really happy that people are coming in and enjoying themselves.
Yeah, it's very well said. And I think it really succeeds. And like you were saying, like there's a humanity to it, just like people, like it feels like people just acting like they would like with your neighbors or stuff, you know what I mean? Like everything is so polarized online, but when you get just people face to face and talking, like it does make things just a lot more, I don't know, reasonable, I guess. I don't even know.
You start to see people as human beings.
Yeah.
You start to realize that before political ideology or sex or race or anything, like just, or nationality, like people are just human beings, And I think that's sort of like, that's easy to forget when you're just looking at each other through computer screens.
Yeah. We have to wrap up there, but it's a great film, Core Jefferson, American fiction.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Kristin Gore was an Emmy nominee for Saturday Night Live. Damian Kulash was a Grammy winner for OK Go. Here it goes again. And they're here to discuss their new film, The Beanie Bubble, which is on Apple TV Plus. You're both married, which is great. I read an interview you both did, and Damian, you said something great that I wrote down. It was, we don't think alike, but we agree on about 9 out of 10 things, maybe even more. We just never get there in the same way. And I thought that was like really interesting. And I was wondering how that kind of like that aspect of your relationship helps in terms of co-directing, where, obviously you have to do that, but I wonder the different perspectives coming together. I just found that really interesting. And how did that help the creative process here?
We were well, we were really I mean, we realized quickly after getting together personally that professionally we wanted to join forces, and our brains do work completely differently. I tend to really sort of build from the ground up and kind of layer things organically and think about characters and stories, and that's sort of my whole focus. And Damian is much more sort of starting from where he wants to end up and going backwards. And we try to meet in the middle, and we found that that actually enhances both of our, it raises both of our games. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we definitely. We could not have made our film individually. It just you know, we've both worked on plenty of projects by ourselves, but this type of thinking, like Kristin said, I tend to reason from an endpoint, going like, if we need to make a splash of this size, then how high does the cliff have to be, and who's jumping off of it? And she's starting with someone and going like, where do they want to go, and hopefully it leads to a cliff. You know, especially because the film we made is very fragmented, and we wanted to tell these three different stories at the same time. Both of those ways of thinking were kind of crucial at all times, and of course we can see some of that. You know, we always can switch to the other person's mindset, but most problems, like Cord said, every day something's going to go wrong. Usually many things are going to go wrong, and they're one of those two mindsets is much more likely to get there faster. So it made for a really nice, kind of gives us one larger hive mind, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's great. I thought that was like, I was like, this probably makes it even a better experience, like you're saying too. You mentioned like the story that you're telling here is like three different like main characters, basically, or maybe four too if you include Ty, but the three women are obviously the focus of the film, and then different timelines, and the way it's structured I found so creative and like really invigorating as a viewer. And you do a great job of like balancing or keeping the audience like figuring out where everything is, certainly with like dates on the screen, but just in general. And I guess like, how did you approach that and making sure that all of that, the timeline jumping around, was clear? And did you give thoughts to like making each section look different, or how did you kind of like approach that and find the way that it looks in the film, which obviously is a success? So like, how did you kind of figure that out?
Well, we knew, first of all, I mean, the reason we have these three timelines is because we didn't really want to tell the story of the Beanie Babies or of the man who got rich on Beanie Babies. We wanted what we, you know, in reading the book that was adapted for this, what we saw was that there was this cycle of mistreatment, and that it was the same, like that the female relationship to the American dream was playing out right before our eyes in this very weird bubble. And so we wanted to show that cycle, and to have each of our characters, we wanted to go on the ride with them as opposed to sort of just watch one guy screw over three women in a row. And so we knew that we'd be sort of like overlapping all these stories, and that they were close enough in time that we couldn't, the signifiers weren't going to be like all of a sudden we're in the 50s, you know, like that we would need those to be subtle, but also meaningful. And so we gave each of the characters a very specific color palette, and tried to unify the film by having each of those color palettes sort of equally intense and moving at the same pace, if that makes sense. Like they each start with a single color, and as it gets more complicated, they move into a second color, and then a third, and then it sort of simplifies back out again at the end. But what we didn't want to do is sort of like jump from one aspect ratio to another, or jump, you know, like have this kind of jarring differences. But we wanted to sort of feel like the world is always a little bit lifted. It's always a little bit of a fable, but three different ones.
And we had incredible partners with our production designer and with our cinematographer and with our costume designer. We were all sort of put it on a big spreadsheet and that was printed out floor to ceiling, you know, in the production office. And everyone could add to it and figure out, you know, in this scene where it's primarily a Robbie character scene and we want it to be really heightened, then these are the colors that we're going to use. And so that everyone was on the same page. Narratively, we wanted it to feel like you're doing the same emotional journey with each of the women, and we talked about it like sort of a roller coaster where you can jump cars, but you're still all on the same ride going through, so that it hopefully feels cohesive and all, you know, of a piece while we're still jumping between these stories to get at this larger themes of kind of who and what we value and why.
And hopefully making it, like you said, something of a puzzle for the audience to unpack, like to we have the same scene play out in the beginning of the film and the end of the film, but it's the beginning of one woman's journey and the end of another woman's journey, and it's the exact same scene. And hopefully that brings home, like, oh, he hasn't changed at all. Like, he's both good and evil, and the relationship that he has to them is unchanging and sort of toxic.
Yeah, no, it's great. I love it. And I thought the pacing and the way you guys modulate like all of those stories, it's just really great. It's like I said, like very engaged. You mentioned, like, you know, Ty, obviously played by Zach Galifianakis. I found it really, I guess I want to talk about a little about the casting, because you have like incredibly funny people. Like Zach Galifianakis obviously is so funny, and Elizabeth Banks so funny, and Geraldine Viswanathan, so funny. I love her in Blockers. I thought she was great. Yet this is not necessarily a movie I would say is like a Zach Galifianakis comedy, right? Because it's so much drama and it's like very serious, and it felt like very subversive, I guess, to cast someone like Zach in the role of Ty. And I guess, like, was that, obviously I'm sure it was intentional, but like why was that something you felt like would be a great way to maybe to like seduce the audience, I guess, or like how did you kind of think about it?
Sure. Yeah, we never thought about anyone except Zach for the role. Actually, the movie was inspired by this book that was written. That was the story of the kind of financial story behind the Beanie Baby craze, and then we pulled out these sort of women's stories that were more interesting to us from that book. But from the beginning, Zach was the only person we thought of, and went to him first, actually, and him coming on board really helped the movie come to life. But the reason was we knew him, we knew his work really well. Obviously, he's this insane comedic genius, but he has this incredible capacity for pathos that he doesn't get to put on display that much. You can see it in his show Baskets, where he plays two different characters, and it's such a genius, funny, quirky show, but he goes to some, you know, kind of dark places in that, and you get glimmers of what he's capable of doing. And we just knew that he had all these sort of depths to explore, and that he would do such a fabulous job if we gave him this kind of interesting, different sandbox to play in. And he has this incredible quality. You see it in Between Two Ferns, you see it in some of his stand-up and some of his other roles, where he can say the worst thing to a person, and you still kind of are on his side, you still kind of love him, you know. And that was really crucial for the character of Ty Warner, because the women in the audience, in their journeys, and the audience collectively needs to fall for Ty and see that he's charismatic, and he has a lot of like sparkle and energy, and there's a lot that's fascinating about him. And then you kind of go on this ride where you also then get to see that flowering in very dark ways, and he's capable of great cruelty and betrayal. And so we needed someone like Zach who you could feel all of that with, you know, you could fall for him. And even when he's doing horrible things, you sort of are able to understand. I mean, people have different reactions, but we wanted, because the character of Ty is a broken character, you know. I mean, he's capable of these horrible things, but he also endured horrible things himself as a child, and you can kind of get a hint of where these things are coming from, and he makes reference to them too in the movie. And we just knew that Zach could pull all of that off really beautifully. We hoped he could. We believed in him. He was very up for doing it. He insisted the whole movie through that he's not an actor, and that we'd made a terrible mistake, and that he always joked about us recasting him. But that's just part of his charm.
And he pushed us on the character in ways that were really deep. Like, the character was not written comedically and was not written jokingly, but still he was able to find places where he was like, this feels too much like I'm playing a character. He just is a genuinely wonderful actor, despite what he says.
Yeah, he really does. It's a great performance. I was at the scene of like you were saying, like you really do. It engenders empathy for him, even though, like you said, like he's doing like so many terrible things, and he's such a jerk, obviously, and like not really. But like in the beginning, like the scene with him and Elizabeth Banks after his father, Ty's father dies, I just found that like incredible sequence where I'm like, wow, this is like he's so good in that scene, and like she's obviously incredible as well. Like you mentioned like how the kind of like the film is basically about the cycle of repeating itself and like men exploiting women basically and exploiting their intelligence, and like kind of he's almost like a parasite, right, going from from person to person. And this movie and the story takes place in the 90s, I guess. Like, not to sound too naive, but I mean, it doesn't seem like we've gotten any, society has not gotten any seemingly better. And I guess like, did you get a new perspective on, I don't even know, could you have gotten a new perspective having done the film, or you like, has it given you a new perspective on that, phenomenon of like the very male focused American dream versus like how women experience that American dream?
I mean, I think that was part of the attraction to this idea in the first place, was sort of the question of how do we get to where we are now? That there's this kind of nothing ever changes feeling that we wanted to get at, that like, one of the characters in the film, Liz Banks' character, is basically the age of our mothers in real life. The Maya character, Geraldine's character, is basically our age in real life, and in
the 90s.
In the 90s, sorry,
right.
we were her age.
That was not 18. You're not.
Yeah, right. Sorry, we were, late teenagers, young 20-somethings during that time. Our parents were the same age that Robbie is in the film, sort of 35, 40, and sorry, did I just get that wrong? 45-ish. We found it fascinating that there are different relationships to hope, and there are different relationships to the idea that things are changing, and there are different relationships to sort of opportunity and freedom in America. Like our mothers knew there was a glass ceiling. They saw it coming and fought hard against it. We were sort of raised with this idea that like that's all this thing of the past, that like there's still vestiges of problems, but everything's getting better. And then here we are 20, 30 years later, and clearly things have not substantially gotten better. And that was part of what was exciting about making the film, was to sort of unpack that, to see it's the same threads going through all of this. There's this techno-utopianism. There's this sort of like the marketplace will fix everything. There's this sort of idea that the American dream is really sort of about being, everybody's going to be the one who is the exception. Like, oh, my ideas are going to be the one that get around the system and make me a bajillionaire, or even that being a bajillionaire is what's valuable in life at all. So I wouldn't say that we like learned a new thing about the 90s or about America. Rather, that's sort of what we were trying to unpack.
Yeah, I agree. We were trying to really, I mean, Ty was our stand-in for the American dream, and we would often describe the movie as a funeral for the American dream, but we wanted it to be a second line parade through the French Quarter type of funeral. Like, it's like there's darkness and dysfunction, but we're gonna have a party. We wanted to try to have it be a joyful ride getting at these deeper themes. And it is depressing that we are now, it was so different in the 90s. There was this bubble of hope and optimism that feels so foreign now, but it was really interesting for us to go back there and kind of see where the seeds of now were planted and how they blossomed into some not so great things.
Yeah. We have to wrap there, but it's a great film, really great conversation. Kristin Gore and Damian Kulash, thank you so much. The Beanie Bubble, it's on Apple TV Plus. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christos Nikou, his career's included Apples, and his new film is the Apple TV Plus film Fingernails. Christos, you have incredible leads here, Jesse Buckley and Riz Ahmed. They're two of my favorite actors, and I yet never seen them work in this tone or genre before, right? Like a romantic comedy, they're just both so great. But I guess for you, certainly they're great performers, but what made you realize, or how did you know they would be right for this type of tone and film?
I love both of them in whatever I have seen them before, and especially Jessie is always surprising me with what she's doing, but I have never seen her in something romantic. And at the same time, Riz is a chameleon, adapting from something dramatic like Sound of Metal to something comedic for Lions, but also we have never seen him in something romantic. So I don't know. I was hoping and I was having the instinct that the two of them will create this great chemistry together, and they will play. They will find this aromatic piece that we needed, but at the same time with a little bit more quirky, more playful, like the whole movie, the way that it is, and with how we created the whole tone of the film. I mean,
Do you think, I mean, because they're such good dramatic actors, was that like, did it let you push even the material further, knowing how well they handle, like, you know, like you said, like drama, and Riz is obviously, like you said, doing comedy as well, but like, does their skill as performers let you push what you had written, you know, for the film even further, I guess?
no, actually, we thought we were very close to what we wrote, and the actors adapted completely to the tone. I call the tone of the film melancholic smile tone, and they adapted completely in that. They understood from the first moment. We were very lucky that, first of all, they're amazing humans, except amazing actors. And so they made my life easier and the life of the whole team. And also the way that they adapted to it, it was really impressive. From the first moment, you were feeling that they understood exactly what they have to do there.
Yeah. And their chemistry, like you said, is so great together. You have this film is like a very, you know, a science fiction premise, very heightened, you know, idea, but also very much feels like reality, right? Like it's told, like it could just feel like this is something that exists right now in the world, the era and the time we're living in. I guess, yeah. How did you approach making it feel as real as possible within the larger kind of like sci-fi trappings of the film?
I'm not a big fan of sci-fi films, and not a big fan in general of genre films. I prefer when films can combine a lot of things. And I feel that for me, Fingernails and the previous movie, Apples, that we made are both allegories. And they're allegories about life and allegories about our society. And in both ways, as we're trying to make, in both films, as we're trying to make comment for technology and how technology has changed the way that we experience things in our life, like memory or like love right now in Fingernails. We try to create something that looks a little bit more grounded and that takes place in the past. And we have kept in the whole movie only one technological device, which is the test machine, that everybody goes there to find an answer about their own emotions, as people are doing right now with the technology, and as they are looking all the time on a screen and they're trying to find the love through the screen, when I believe that love should go through eyes and not through screens. And it's fascinating. If you will think, I was reading a research recently that an average person is touching their screen with their finger and their nail probably 2,617 times per day. Which is impressive.
Yeah. You mentioned like the setting and the fingernail machine. How did you kind of like land on how that would look and like how that technology would look? I guess like you're saying, like I thought that like the design of it is so cool, and like it does feel like old fashioned. Like it's like it feels like something foreign but old fashioned. I don't even know how to describe it. I just think it's like really cool in the way you execute how that looks. I just really liked. So I guess like how did you kind of land on what it would look like?
With our production designers, Azu Myers, we discussed about it and about how we will create something that looks really grounded, that looks like the only technological device, but at the same time analog, and also to look a little bit like, I don't know, it's like that you are going there, it's like a microwave in a way machine. It's like that you are going there to cook in order to find love, because sometimes you have to cook to find love. So we try to create everything that looks only one click, that you have to press one button, and then you are looking at a screen and you are waiting for a result. And it's about how everything in our life has become one click right now. And with one click, we can find something on internet, and then we're looking on a screen for this result. I feel that in a way, with the extensive use of technology, we're living a little bit the time of the fast food emotions, and that's what we're trying also to portray in the film.
Yeah, it's a great. You do a great job of it. I mentioned like we talked the test, the fingernails. I saw your film at Telluride, where I think it premiered at Telluride, and the audience when you get to the scene where we're going to see the procedure, I was like one of the I never forget the entire audience was like losing it basically, right? Because it's like they didn't want to see what the fingernail and the whole test, and it was like a great I just loved that whole experience. And I guess I want to ask you, like, how did you like construct how that would look, and like not pushing body horror too much, obviously, because it maybe wouldn't fit with the genre and the story you're telling, but also like going, making sure you're actually paying off like what the test should be. I just found the whole way you constructed that sequence incredibly well done. And I guess like if you could talk a little about it, I'd love to hear it, like how you kind of like modulate and made sure like got to what it is in the film.
We were trying to find the perfect balance on that, because for sure we shot more things. We didn't remove any real nail, but we shot more things. And but we were trying also to find the balance with the audience, and to make something that for sure that will make them feel a little bit uncomfortable in that time. For sure that it will make them feel a little bit the pain of love. Because that's what we're trying to portray with this test. That's what we're trying to depict with this test. But at the same time, without making it a body horror film, because for sure it's a romantic movie, and we wanted to keep it there. So that was I mean that yes, we shot everything, but we edited it in the right way in order to show what it was better for the film.
Yeah, it's pretty. I feel like you got the audience when they're like that into like they're wrapped into that. Like it's like, oh man, like really, like you really are able to like play with them, like you said, and like not make it like body horror, but they're just like the expectations maybe are there that it's going to be. I don't know. I just found that sequence like so well done. It's like really good.
Very funny that in all the screenings that I attended, when they were realizing that we'll have a nail scene. You will feel the whole audience moving a little bit from their chair, a little bit. But it's funny because I did some Q&As that they were asking me why we didn't show more. And I was like, we wanted more? And they were like, yeah, we wanted more to see the blood, to see everything. And I was like, okay. So, yes, no, I agree.
I meant we were talking about Riz Ahmed and Jesse Buckley, the other major actor in the film. You have a great cast, but Jeremy Allen White playing, I would call like if in the like a Ralph Bellamy or like the Bill Pullman kind of like rom-com actor who's not necessarily the first choice, or but he's also like very nice. Like he's not a bad guy, right? You don't like establish him as like an evil foil in the film. And I guess like why like like I love Jeremy in the film. I think he's so great. What was it like? What did he bring to the character, and like kind of what was perfect for him for that role, I guess?
We tried to cast him in a way, because it was first we casted Jesse and Reese, and then we were looking for the third person. And I remember that our casting director suggested Jeremy. I never saw him before because I have never seen Shameless, and it was the time that it was the first season of Bear that it was just released. So I watched it, and immediately we talked and we agreed to do it together. And I think that he's a great actor. He's, first of all, the one-take actor. From the first take, everything is amazing with him. And I think that with him, we wanted to create something that doesn't make the decision for the audience or for Jesse very easy. Because if it was a very typical American film, probably it would have been, I don't know, Danny Trejo, who was always playing the bad guy in every movie. But of course, we didn't want to have that. We wanted to have something that looks much more like life. Nobody's bad in this movie. Nobody's evil. Everybody is trying for their own things and for their own sanity in this crazy world. So that's what we try to show with the film, and I feel that it's much better to show it with an actor like Jeremy than to have somebody that it will be very easy for everybody to decide.
Yeah, I mean that definitely is what makes it, I think, so I really enjoyed that about your film, is that like it is like there are not a lot of easy answers to the questions you're asking, and even I won't spoil the ending, but like even stuff in the final act, I was constantly surprised at the directions you went or didn't go, and all these different things. I guess like how do you want the film to land for audiences, and like kind of like like what are you hoping that they'll take away from it, I guess?
definitely, we are not trying to give answers about a lot of answers about love. We're trying more to question things about love, because first of all, I'm not the God to know everything about love. But at the same time, for sure, something that I learned throughout the whole movie, and something that we're trying to show in the film, is that love sometimes hurts, and also love is something that you need to work on it every day, and you cannot settle on it. And I think that that's what Jess is looking in the film, and her character. And I know that maybe some of the people from the audience will go about, but why she's trying to escape from a relationship that is very nice, like the relationship that she has with Jeremy. But the thing is that it's her decision, and for me, it's her movie, and it's about how a person, and especially a woman in US right now, can decide about herself and about her own emotions. And that's something that I hope that the audience will get from the end of the film.
Yeah, I think they will. It's a great film, Fingernails. You can watch it on Apple TV Plus. Christos Nikou, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chloe Domont's career has included Shooter, Ballers, and Billions, and her new film is Fair Play, which is now streaming on Netflix. I've seen, Chloe, you discuss how this is a story you couldn't not tell, I think is what I saw you say in another interview. And I guess I wanted to ask, like, why was packaging this story as a thriller the way you do the best way to tell this specific story?
I would say the genre really came to me with the idea, because it was this feeling that I was having over and over again in my personal life, where my career started to take off, and I started to get opportunities, and my first reaction wasn't excitement, it was fear. And it was fear of losing, my relationship or my male partner, or somehow my success would be the unraveling of my relationship in some way. And so I wanted to use the genre to shine a light on the emotional terror that I feel is too often normalized. And to me, it was kind of like the feeling of coming home, at the end of a day, and fearing the person I loved, but also fearing the person I was becoming. That was a feeling that I only ever felt in the genre space. So to me, it was the only lens to tell the story.
Yeah, it's such a great choice, because it is such a great thriller in that aspect. You have these two incredible performers, and Alden and Phoebe. They're completely going for it, I feel like, in different ways. I guess I want to start with Phoebe. Like, how did you discuss her character? Because I feel like she is very complicated, and the character, like, the whole film is complicated, right? And I think obviously intentionally so. But I guess, like, with her character, like, how did you talk about, like, her evolution, how she should, like, kind of, like, react? Because a lot of it is so much of her, like you're saying, like, kind of silently reacting to things, right? Or having to internalize things and say something else, or all these different, it seems like a very tricky performance. And I guess, like, how'd you kind of work with her to make sure it was the right performance for the film?
Yeah, I mean, we had always talked about that Emily, she's not a hero, she's a human. And she has wants and needs, and it's messy and ugly at times. And so that's kind of where we started with the conversation, in terms of Emily. And I think I also, just wanted to show how women are forced to play ugly to survive in that kind of world with those kinds of men. I think there's a version of this film where it could have ended where she's just more stereotypically the victim that we see, like, just a victim that we see just playing out more in the stereotypes. And the film could have ended on her just being a victim and her just being abused, and that's it. But I wasn't interested in that. What was important to me is that we end with her reclaiming the power that Luke takes, away from her. I was also just not interested in making something that was black and white. I wanted to lean into the grays. I wanted to show that these things are complex and oftentimes, like, how a person's want, or, you know, it's not just one want, you know, we have multiple needs that are often in conflict to each other and in opposition to each other. And that was the same thing with like Luke's character. It was important to me to not villainize him too, you know, too soon into the film, and to show that you know, he's a man who's struggling with things that he doesn't know how to deal with. And I would say the feelings that he has, you know, that doesn't make him, the feelings that he has don't make him a bad guy. You know what I mean? Those feelings themselves are not his fault. He was raised under more traditional ideas of gender roles, and he's wired a certain way. And I wanted to show that he represents, you know, just many generations of men that I feel like are caught in the middle between adhering to a modern feminist society, but still having been raised on traditional ideas of masculinity. And to me, like, it's that struggle between those two things. That's really where the conflict lies, but also like that's the most human part of it that I thought was the most interesting thing to explore, you know, on his side, and then on her side as well, is this idea of like a woman who is a strong, independent woman, you know, but at the same time, because she's afraid of losing her relationship, she starts to undermine herself and minimize herself, and, you know, and minimize her success and her excitement for her success. And because she's afraid of it hurting her partner's ego, and afraid of losing her relationship over it. And you know, that was something that I think was something that we really was at the heart of what was going on with her character, is that juggling, you know, trying to juggle the career and being a really ambitious woman, you know, but also catering to the man she loves, who's not equipped to handle her success.
Yeah, I love that about you, when you're saying there about Luke. I was watching the film, you're like, it's so, he is like, there are aspects of him where you're saying like you kind of like are able to understand him, or he's trying to be nice, right, or in like nice guy way, and then like it's a lot easier to do that when there's no stakes, I guess, I feel like. And then like for him, right, it's easy for him to just be like very supportive when he has there's no real stakes for him to be supportive. And I just found that like it's such a great character, and I think Alden is just awesome in the film. He's so I just love him so much. He obviously had such like a big comeback year, I feel like people talked about, but I guess like for him, I also think you make the character goes in a lot of places that I'm not sure a lot of, not to besmirch other actors, I'm just not sure a lot of actors would maybe want to do like or go there, because I think he played, you know, he has to be so pathetic and all these like just not great, obviously, as the character evolves. I guess like what about Alden really stood out to you prior to this project, and then like how did like the experience of working with him like maybe pay off those expectations, I guess?
Totally. And I will say, like, when I met with you know, I met with a bunch of actors, and other actors I met with, they came in judging the character right away. And I thought, like, that's not the way into this movie. Even if you don't like the character, you have to empathize with his pain and what he's struggling with and what he's unable to cope with. And that's, you know, I think that was really the way in. And Alden, you know, he never judged the character, and I never judged the character, you know, around him, because even when writing him, I had to put myself in his shoes and think, okay, you know, and just empathize with the situation, you know, as much as maybe it made me uncomfortable. Like I had to really put myself in that situation to write from that place. And you know, in many ways I do empathize. I empathize with the fact that if you're raised to believe that your self-worth, right, is entirely on achieving this one thing, and then you are working your whole life to, you know, towards that, and you don't get it, and then the person you love gets it instead. I mean, like I empathize with how tricky that can be, and how crushing it can be as well. So, you know, I think we both just really understood that the more we leaned into his pain and his struggle with those things, I think that was going to be the more interesting version of the film. And also, I would say, like, I knew that it was going to take a very confident man to play that level of insecurity. And, you know, right away, I could just sense Alden is super confident. He's super comfortable in his own skin. He's super comfortable with who he is. And so I knew that that was going to be the type of, the type of actor to go to those places. Because I feel like you cast someone who's they'll be too insecure to go to those insecure places, and then that's just going to be a recipe for disaster. So, I mean, everything was just in my gut and in our conversations was just telling me like he was my Luke, and he just brought he took what I had, in my mind and on the page to a whole other level. What he brought with the level of humanity and the complexities and different shades of all of that on every take. I mean, I think surprised me in so many ways, and whether it was with a look or a little comment or something under his breath or whatever he did, I think it just added so much more dimension than what I ever really thought.
Yeah. It's a great film, and it's a great film to talk about, I feel like, after. So there's a lot to talk about, but we do have to wrap up. Chloe Domont movie is Fair Play. It's on Netflix. Watch it and then talk about it with your friends. I feel like it'll be a good one to discuss.
Yeah.
Cord Jefferson, director of American Fiction. Kristin Gore and Damian Kulash, directors of The Beanie Bubble. Christos Nikou, director of Fingernails, and Chloe Domont, director of Fair Play. All great films. I wanted to ask all of you, I guess, like, just going back to when you were first, like, what was the movie that made you maybe want to become a director in the first place? Is there one or some kind of project that you were like, wow, this is something I really want to do? Cord, I'll put you on the spot and start with you, and then we can go around.
I think a real spiritual predecessor to American Fiction is this movie called Hollywood Shuffle by Robert Townsend. I saw that when I was probably about 9 or 10. And I think that although I probably didn't know what the definition of satire was back then, I think that I know the feeling that it gave me, and it was a real revelation that this was a movie, I'd heard about racism and civil rights, and we were these are things that I understood from class and from home, but these were issues that were normally talked about in such like morose tones and very grim circumstances. Movies like Mississippi Burning and stuff like that, really like awful, horrific films. And then this was a movie that all of a sudden was talking about racism in a way that made you laugh every single scene, and like these were people who were finding joy in all of this and finding ways to celebrate and laugh in all of this. And to me, that was I just felt like a real light bulb go over my head in that moment. And so while I wouldn't say necessarily that that's what inspired me to make film, that is something that has stuck with me since I was, for the past 3 decades.
That's good. Kristin and Damian, how about you? Each. You could have separate ones, obviously.
Oh, thank you.
There are too many films that made us want to make stuff. That I'm going to follow Cord's example and just think of one that inspired this particular film. You wouldn't see it on the surface necessarily, but Casino. It took me years to figure out why I was so in love with Casino. I mean, it's a great film. The Scorsese films are all great, but realizing that there was something special about the way color and atmosphere worked in that film, because it's set in a ridiculous place, that you can have this very heavy and serious type of drama that lives in a surreal world and is grounded because the world itself is meant to be surreal. And to me, that was the attraction to the Beanie Baby craze at all, was that we could tell this really dark tale in the middle of an incredibly joyful burst of ridiculousness.
Yeah, that was for sure a reference for us in a lot of ways. But in terms of childhood inspiration or wanting to be a director, tell films through stories, broadcast news was a big one for me, because it was filmed. I remember when it was filmed in the Virginia, DC area, which is where we grew up, and having a friend's mother be an extra, and kind of for the first time realizing how these stories were actually made, that they didn't just appear magically on the screen, and then the characters in that story, Holly Hunch's character was so strong and funny and layered and in surprising ways, and I was really drawn to her, and so that was a really big one for me as well.
That's great. Those are 2 great films. And Casino, I think, is great too for Beanie Bubble because of the it's such a great movie about capitalism, like the corrosive nature of capitalism, right? And I think that also is probably appropriate for Beanie Baby craze.
Well,
certainly.
yeah, and I don't want to prattle on too long about it, but what I really love is that it's set in the 70s and 80s, and yet the color scheme is not at all 70s and 80s. Like, it's the colors of the shiny past. And so you go back to this place where you're just like, the moment before now when anything was possible, and it's just like sunny, and it has a slightly lifted quality that makes it somehow more real instead of less.
Yeah. Christos, how about you?
The movie that made me to want to be a filmmaker was The Truman Show, and it's always an inspiration for everything I'm doing, I think, because first of all, it's an amazing prophecy about life. I think that it has one of the best scripts ever. And at the same time, it has the perfect balance. As I said earlier, I'm not a big fan of genre films. I prefer movies that they're doing a lot of things and they are creating a lot of different emotions. And The Truman Show has the perfect balance between comedy and drama, has the perfect balance between creating something that is high concept, but at the same time, very grounded. And how you can create something that is dystopian, but at the same time, it's very humanistic. So I think that Andrew Niccol, especially with his first two films, created something that, as a writer, that we haven't seen a lot before. And then, of course, Charlie Kaufman continuing that way with his stories. But I think that I love that film so much. Yes, it's a great film.
So good. It's an incredibly good film. Chloe, how about you?
I'd say there were like 3 films, but starting with Network. My father showed me that film when I was like 10 years old, probably too young to watch that kind of film, but he showed me lots of inappropriate films. No, it just blew my mind, just in terms of tone. And I mean, the script is, I think, the greatest script that's ever been written, and that's not a matter of opinion, that's a fact. But yeah, just the script on every single level, the script, the performances, tone, it just completely just drew me in a way that I was like, I'd never seen anything like that before. Then I would say Dog Day Afternoon, just staying with Sidney Lumet. That was another film that I think I'd never seen a heist film like that before. And then I think it just subverted the genre in a way that was so exciting to me, just with the character and how just a character, who a character is can subvert a genre in a way that was just so heartbreaking and devastating and funny and again, a kind of tonal mashup that was so exciting to me. And then I would say the third one was Paper Moon. Again, kind of like con artist, high genre, but the father-daughter story was it just had everything I feel like you want in a movie. It was incredibly entertaining and very emotional and devastating, and just the last shot when he's driving away, just the power of a last shot, what that could do, I think I think those just cinematically and the script, just everything was just like, why would I want to spend my life doing anything else than trying to do something like this? Yeah.
It's good. All the movies you guys mentioned there, I feel like, and also all of your films here are they all have specific tones and are so disciplined in holding those tones, right? And I find that like the best films certainly do that. I guess like I don't even know, is it an inevitable thing? Like how difficult is it to make sure you're being faithful to the tone of the film on like a day-to-day basis while you're making the film? I guess I just am fascinated by that. And I guess, Cord, like we were saying before, like your film, obviously it's just so locked in the tone. Like how do you guys make sure you're being faithful to the tone of the story, I guess?
I think that for me, I tried to make something that was satirical and never farcical. And I think that was my intention. And so I tried to find that on the page, first of all, when you're in the writing process. And then once we were on set, that you try to dial it in on set. And sometimes I would feel that the comedy was getting too broad and you try to rein it in on set. And then sometimes you're sort of like dipping too low and you want to sort of like, it's hard to come out of a dive that low. And so you try to formulate it there. But really for me, it all came out in post. Like that's where I really struck the right balance. I had a wonderful editor named Hilda Rasula, and she never lied to me. I sort of told her, please never lie to me. And so she would always tell me the truth, and sometimes it would piss me off. But after a few minutes of being pissed off, I would realize that she was right. So, but really that's where it all came out. It's really sort of like refining and sort of like sanding down the edges and sort of like making it less broad when we could, and making it less dark when we needed to. So all of that stuff was just really perfected, I think, in post. And that is, you know, I'd be surprised if people said other things, just because I think that's, you know, that's where you really sort of get in, and think, at least for me, got into the sort of like nitty gritty and finding the perfect balance.
Kristin, Damian, would you agree with that then?
Completely. I had to completely agree with that. I mean, the whole "we'll fix it in post," you hear that as sort of a joke a lot of the time, but it's it was true. And it's I agree with every part of Gore's answer, because there were times on set where it was, I mean, you get to work with these incredible actors, and they sometimes want to do it the way the script is, and sometimes want to off-road a little bit, which is super interesting lots of times, and then sometimes would only be interesting if that became their character's journey from then on, you know. But to balance it with everything else, you have to kind of keep in mind something that that you kind of only have in your sort of soul of what you hope the end thing is going to be. And so when it was a little bit off in different places, our editor Jane Rizzo, who is also
Spectacular.
really, really wonderful,
And not a liar.
was, yeah, thank goodness, was a magician. I mean, she was great, and it was so gratifying to be able to polish it in the ways that we needed to get it all of a piece yesterday.
I will offer a counterpoint, however.
Okay.
I think that it while you do find it, like post is when you find it and it stays. For me, it was mostly it felt like an endurance game. That basically, like we talk about this a lot, that most of directing is decision fatigue. That like there's 10 really urgent decisions you need to make, and in the end, one of them is going to be crucial. The other 9 are like somebody's got to decide, but probably A or B. It doesn't, like, both of them will make a good film. You just don't know which one it is that's going to be the really crucial one, and so it's sort of about keeping up. Caring about every detail when you're writing, caring about every detail when you're prepping, caring about every detail when you're shooting, even the ones that you're sort of like, it's a handbag, I don't know, just pick a handbag. You have to like check back in with yourself and be like, which handbag is actually telling the story right now? And that going back over and over and over, that what Cord said about sanding it down and refining, that all does happen in post eventually, but you only have the stuff to work with there if you've relentlessly never given up in that respect. And so that tone, mostly, like I mostly knew we were on tone when our producer would say something offhand about, oh, well, you guys know what you want. And realizing, oh yeah, we actually do really know what we want. That you have to have an answer every time someone asks a question, even if you're too exhausted to come up with one.
Right. Christos, how about you? In terms of keeping the tone?
For sure, it depends on the tone of every film, and if you can create that tone on the post, because you can create it even with just one piece of music. You can change the tone of the film. It's something very easy. But the thing is that I feel that for me, for example, the way that it worked in both films, and because I call both films melancholic smile tone films, I knew from the beginning that I had this in my mind, and I knew from the script how we will go there. And so I had it all the time in my mind. It was the most important thing, the tone of the film, to not lose it and to not go somewhere else. Even when the actors were trying to do something else, I was trying to keep them in this bubble of the melancholic smile. So we were having this on the script, and then on set, we were trying to keep it by, for example, in a lot of scenes, in most of the scenes, I was playing a song for the actors before the shooting and during the takes, and very loud. So the whole crew and cast were listening one song. And with this song, I was trying to create the right mood for the scene. And the actors also were connecting easier. And it was it was making, I mean, on set, there is a lot of noise. And there is also a lot of distraction. And there are so many things that you're always feeling that are not so, so you're trying to find ways how to create one family and a place where also the actors can perform in the best way without feeling that they're going to work, but they're just there like humans. So that was for me the most tricky thing, but at the same time, the most interesting thing, how you can keep this tone by finding new ideas all the time.
Yeah, it's great. And Chloe, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's actually the most challenging thing to constantly keep control over. And especially sometimes I think when you get into post and you're in post for 3 months and you start to lose perspective, you know, it can be, I think I found that actually the most challenging part. You know, with my film, I wanted to create this pressure cooker thriller and this kind of ballooning tension. And I actually found I had a lot more comedy in the script that I ended up cutting out in post, because the comedy was actually deflating the balloon of tension. And that was interesting. That was something that I discovered myself, just in terms of tonal balance. But I just feel like it's a constant temperature check in performance, you know, and levels. I mean, in everything, it's just constant, like, oh, okay. And I think, like, I'm someone who does a lot of takes because I want to have options, you know, I want to have options because you can go in with such a strong, you know, very clear vision for exactly what you want, but still get options because you might change your mind in post. And when you know, you just want to have all those shades. And I was just so lucky that I had 2 incredible actors that just gave me so many different shades, that I was able to dial a little bit more left in some scenes than I originally thought, or dial a little bit more right. Because when you put it together as a whole, you know, you just need that. And yeah. So
yeah, I think that's just if I could add one more thing of what Chloe just said, I think that is, you know, that's really where the kill your darling stuff comes in, at least for me. It's like, because I'm sure that some of those things, those jokes were funny, right? Like, it's like, I'm sure that they were funny jokes. You have great actors and you're a great writer. And so I'm sure that some of them, you know, it was painful to cut because you're like, this is a really good joke and they performed it really well and it's really funny. But, you know, you sort of like, in looking at the grand scheme of things and looking at it as a whole, you know, we lost like 11 scenes from what we shot, which to me sort of like felt like a lot. But there's some stuff that's like amazing that I just really, really love. And it was really difficult for me to cut them out of the film. But it's like, you realize like, oh, this isn't the movie though. Like this is not the film that we're making. It's sort of like, this is a wonderful 2 minutes. And I really, really wish that we could find a way to put it in something else eventually. But it's like, these 2 minutes do not belong in this movie, unfortunately.
Well, and everything is about emotion in the end. That like filmmaking can be so clinical, and it has to be so clinical to get something so enormous made. But you're basically like trying to write a song, like something that will just hit you, just like it just comes across as an emotion. But instead of like playing all the instruments, you're actually like writing out each note one at a time, months apart. And then you have to listen to the thing and see if it actually feels the way it was supposed to. And of course, notes are going to need to change and whole passages that are going to need to change. And you're lifting things that, you know, it's like that constantly questioning yourself to make sure that the emotion is still there, even when you're losing perspective. That's the whole challenge.
Yes, but in a way, I feel that also sometimes we're following some rules because we need to keep the tone, for example, of what you said, Chloe, about the thriller, for example. I was watching 3 days ago here in the cinema in Athens again, 7 by Fingernails, and it has a very funny line in the last scene that I didn't remember at all, about a dead dog. And Kevin Spacey says that, oh, I didn't kill that one. I didn't even remember that. And I feel that for example, life is everything. Movies should also be everything. I think that sometimes we're staying so much in rules on creating a very specific tone, I'm sure that Oppenheimer is a great movie, but I'm sure that Oppenheimer in real life, he was laughing sometimes. He wasn't so serious all the time. So I believe that that's how we should create also. We are educating the audience. We are responsible. We are learning them that there is that thing about also the tone that I think that we are responsible. I mean, we in Greece, they were responsible in the past, in the ancient Greece, by creating ancient drama and ancient comedy. That because you knew that you will go to the theater either to laugh or to cry. And life is not like that. Life is everything. So I think that the tone should be a little bit more mixed sometimes.
No, and I agree. I think that, and what was interesting when I talk about like the comedy that got cut out, I think it was when scenes were just more about the comedy, you know, and more about breath or, you know, something like that. I think for me, like the comedy that stayed is when it was embedded in the tension, you know, and that I found that actually the comedy with my film was of how uncomfortable things got. That's when people were laughing because they were so uncomfortable. And it wasn't just like the jokes. I cut out the jokes because that just wasn't fitting. But then the comedy was coming from just like the extreme, you know, human behavior. And that's what, you know, it was funny because the first Sundance screening we had, it was crazy. People were laughing throughout the whole film. And my producer turned to me at the end and he was like, did we make a comedy? But it was because people were so uncomfortable, they couldn't help but laugh. And that was something, you know, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. We have to wrap up, but this has been so interesting hearing you all speak about this, and I've had so much fun chatting. Cord Jefferson, American Fiction, Kristin Gore and Damian Kulash, The Beanie Bubble, Christos Nikou, Fingernails, and Chloe Domont. Fair Play, all great films that you should check out. Thank you all for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
loved it.